Can I have approval of the meeting notes for March 16th, 2022? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. We're gonna start with you, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. As always, a reminder that the meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. And I believe we go right into general public comments.
Okay, I don't have the list yet, but do we have any public comments? We have none right now, so proceed.
All right. Staff update today will be very brief since you did get that full update last week. Nothing has changed since then. But just a reminder on the total funds available. Our money, again, is pay-as-you-go, or it's doled out as it's collected rather than being bonded up front. There's about $15.5 million in the rural allocation and just under $3 million urban. This slide shows the projects that you'll actually be considering today for a total request of $2.34 million. If all of these are approved, that would have $13.1 million left in the project balance for rural funds. That doesn't quite tell the whole story. As you know, you considered some projects last week as well. This table shows the financial impact should all 9 projects be approved. The total requested for all of rural projects is $3.88 million. City of Isle of Palms, $120,000. Just over $500,000, City of Charleston. $734,000, Town of Mount Pleasant, for a total of $854,000 urban, and a total request this cycle of $5.25 million. If all of the projects are approved, the total balance will be $13.2 million remaining in the account. Excuse me. And just an overview of the projects you will be considering today. There are 5. They're all rural today. And as a reminder, the first one there on the list, the Sea Island Small Farmers Co-op, was deferred from the last meeting so they could come back this meeting and provide additional information as requested by you all. The other 4 projects are the Edisto Island Open Land Trust Legacy Live Oak Memorial Park Expansions B, C, and D. That's a total request of $160,000 in Greenbelt funds, and they are offering an 85% match. The Peters Point Virgo Easement, 17.4 acre conservation easement with a $45,000 request in Greenbelt funds with a 78% match. And also the Whooping Island Scenic Buffer. This is a total of 10 acres, a fee simple purchase of $167,500 with a 5% match. And the College of Charleston Foundation Stone Oak Preserve expansion, just over 11 acres with a request of $131,700 and offering 102% match. All right, we'll move right into
Let's go to the first one.
Consideration of FY22 winter projects. And while Tom Austin, I'm sorry, got that backwards, out of order there. While Mr. McShane from Lacuna Corporation and I believe Ashley Demosthenes come up from Low Country Land Trust to provide some additional information to you and answer your questions. Just a reminder of the location of this project. Just off of Highway 17, right at the intersection of the Wallace River Bridge. And this is a fee simple request in the rural area for 19.7 acres and a 1.84 million request.
Mr. Salmonson, I'd like to make a statement, if I could, before we start. I believe that the Charleston County Greenbelt Advisory Board members should be treated with respect, just as we should be respectful of our constituents and applicants. That being said, There is no amount of political clout or personal agendas that will have any bearing on how I vote. I vote my conscience. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike McShane. I'm a resident of 1501 Ravens Point Road on Johns Island. For full disclosure, I formerly served as chairman of our Department of Natural Resources, and I'm the current chairman of our state conservation bank. I'm here before you this morning in my capacity as president of Lacuna. Lacuna Inc. is a 14-year-old 501c3 that myself and several others established for the ability to protect iconic properties and move quickly. Primarily, our history has been in Colleton and Beaufort counties through the Ace Basin, although we have done projects elsewhere, but that is where principally, and this is the opportunity Lacuna is here. Lacuna will provide the capital oftentimes to acquire a piece of property that then transfers to another entity in an appropriate time. That entity could be DNR, it could be a local county, parks and recreation system, it could be even another nonprofit. It could even be a federal agency. And we also have pending transactions taking place. Several months back in 2021, I had the pleasure and opportunity to meet the 7 members of the Sea Islands Small Farmers Cooperative, led by Helen Field and Curtis and Aminette. They were looking for the opportunity to sell this piece of property with the idea of trying to protect it, but were under some pressure as a number of offers had been tendered to them. And Lacuna has stepped in, contracted to acquire this property. In fact, for full disclosure, this afternoon at 2 p.m., we will close on site with all 7 members, all in their 80s and 90s, present today to close on this. The 3 principles that what appeal to Lacuna, and I believe to the public, to protect this piece of property. It's the site of the 1730s Stono Rebellion. There are actually archaeological treasures on this property, including a cellar of a building that was used during that rebellion. This is a multi-generational, minority-owned small farmers tract and an opportunity to engage in an appropriate use of shore-based water access on the Wallace River that community has been looking for. And this would provide safety in doing that. I understand, and I apologize for not being here last week, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I was attending in Columbia on our state conservation bank, similar committee. Our bank board will meet next week. So before your full board meeting, you should have a report of what the state bank and potentially other sources of funding. The application, and Eric, if you could, do you have a slide that shows the amount again? Because I think there's a clarification in me. So the requested amount should have been up to 1.825, not the 1.840. I'm sorry if somehow they got.
I believe that included some additional closing costs that were
Yeah, but
requested.
Lacuna is covering all of that. So just to be clear, the request is simply for the actual purchase price, up to that purchase price with the idea, and I think the committee will understand, I can't commit today until the bank board makes a commitment next week, and even what may happen between now and your full board meeting, be able to report the reduction of that. But the request is only for up to the amount of the purchase price. Lacuna's will cover the cost of all closing costs.
Which was like 90,000?
It's going to be closer to 100,000 with surveys, appraisals, environmental phase 1s, et cetera, that anyone in the industry obviously understands what those costs are to do that. There, I believe, also was a question on what would be the takeout of this, if I could use that term. And I think you've been provided a copy of a letter of intent with David Bennett, Executive Director of Charleston County Parks and Recreation, to commit to working through a process. PRC is going through their capital needs assessment as we speak. And this will give an opportunity for Lacuna to hold us in trust, excuse me, until PRC is ready to take that transaction, and we would accommodate that. And then again, I would offer Lacuna will cover those costs, Eric, so there'll be no secondary request for that. To do that. And thirdly, I believe one of the other questions was reference to there are 2 existing billboards with Adams Outdoor. There is a legal mechanism in the lease that would allow one to terminate those billboards. That's a discussion that I'm waiting to have after Lacuna is in a position to then we'll have transferred the lease to Lacuna's responsibility, and then in concert and collaboration with PRC, how to move forward on the process. I would think that we would be interested in seeing the billboards removed. But one will just have to accept there's a process that one to go through that in that lease that the small farmers took when they placed those 2 billboards present to do so.
Would that be income back towards this project if they stayed in place?
The lease does provide a little bit of income. I want to set standards here. This is not a tremendous amount of income. We're talking about a couple $1,000s a year. So we're not, this is not something that is going to be substantial.
Okay.
But any additional income would be just pooled, and I'd make the commitment just to provide that to PRC, because again, I'm not looking for this to be the whole purpose of Lacuna was to be able to move quickly.
Okay.
And even since this contract was accepted, there have been 2 offers made to the co-op that are even higher than the contracted price that we have for that. I think this is, if I may, just a moment, Mr. Chairman, I offer this to the committee. There's a rare opportunity in our community today that when we come across something as iconic as this, to be able to then know that future generations will not whiz by it at 60 miles an hour and never know what happened there. To think about what happened in the 18th century to what happened in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when that was considered so far out in the country, probably nobody paid attention to it. To today, what we've all seen. This is, in many ways, I think, just as iconic as Angel Oak became a decade ago. When there is not just historic relevance here, there's cultural relevance here, and not to mention the fact this is on deep water. There are not many places that today that would have that history that haven't or will be developed. And I think this is the opportunity for the county, the state, and others to step in and see to it that this property is preserved. I'll answer any questions that may.
Any questions?
Can I ask one?
Yeah, please.
How long is the lease right now? Do you know how long it is?
I'm going by memory, Mr. Scardon. I believe the lease goes another 7 years, but I can confirm. I just have to pull that up, and I can report that back to Eric.
Elizabeth?
Yes, so, are you fairly confident that the billboards may be removed? I know that's a negotiation you can't control, but in terms of seeing a possibility there.
There's a very fair chance that the billboards will be removed.
Okay.
I actually would be optimistic that Adams Outdoor Advertising will recognize the value of this piece of property.
So they could potentially become a partner in
They
this
could.
as well?
I'd welcome that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a possibility.
And I offer as experience for those who might drive down 17, there are 2 billboards in the Yates Basin, right there at 303 and 17. Lacuna bought that property, where with the same outdoor advertising company, had a different lease that did not have a termination clause, but we worked that out. And meanwhile, while they exist, they're DNR related messaging on those billboards. So there's a history here, we're sensitive to this, and I can only offer the opportunity again was a landowner had that track right across from the Donnelly Wildlife Management Area. It would have been a shame that a 24-hour truck stop, which is it was heading to in the heart of the Ace Basin, would be there. Lacuna stepped in, DNR now has ownership of that. We transitioned that over and moved to do these type of projects.
Worst case is 7 years from now, they will come down.
Sorry, Mr.
Worst
Scott.
case is 7 years from now, they will come down. There's no desire
Or
to
whatever
renew
the
lease.
time period is,
Yeah,
I
whatever
would
it is.
offer
Right.
that. There is, in this lease, an opportunity for termination, but it's just going to take a legal mechanism to go through.
Right.
Maybe sooner.
Yep. Visa.
It seems like a fantastic project. I was a little surprised at its scoring. I think it would have scored better had some of the things been able to be defined beforehand, like the public access and the possibility of a match. I realized that was impossible, totally realized that. Are you able to elaborate now at all on possible matches, or that's still very undefined and not?
So, one, I did not make the application, so I have to defer to what was put in the application by Low Country Land Trust. And as I said last week, I'm sorry, I was at a state bank meeting. There is an application in the state bank. The application is requesting $200,000 from the state. There are opportunities to talk to some other entities and governmental agencies that are interested in this project. It's timing. There's sensitivity here to get this. When you have 7 members of a co-op, all in their 80s and 90s, time is of the essence.
I understand all that, and I appreciate it. I just didn't know if you could elaborate on the possibilities of a match. And I'm so happy to hear that the definition of the public access might now be available. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So what you have, has that been distributed to the committee members?
It has, and welcome to show it on the screen.
Sure. So again, this letter of intent is really based on the 3 principles of the historic preservation and therefore the interpretation of that. What's really healthy here is PRC has this expertise with Kawkaw Interpretive Center literally within a stone's throw. And that actually created some excitement amongst the leadership of PRC because of its connectivity to Kawkaw. There is the story about the small farmers that needs to be told. This county needs to know that, about what struggles these small farmers did. The fact that they could put this together in the time frame that they did, I think is an amazing story unto itself. And then working and wearing my former hat at DNR, collaborating, PRC manages water access through DNR in Charleston County. I think there would be ability of some funding to bring what I term a shore-based angler, fishing, crabbing capabilities there, kayak, paddleboard, not a boat ramp. I'm gonna be real clear, I'm not talking about a boat ramp. I'm talking about where someone can get safely access onto water there for those activities. So I think the preservation of the history and the telling the story about the small farmers and the appropriate water access would be the 3 principles of public interest and public access.
I'd like to make a comment. Good afternoon, sorry, it's not afternoon yet. Good morning, everybody. Ashley Demosthenes here, President and CEO of Low Country Land Trust. And I just wanted to officially on the record state how thrilled we are to be a partner in this project. And as you know from our history as an organization, and our relationship with the Greenbelt program has been really strong. We strive to bring you excellent projects that bring several sources of match in almost everything that we've brought to you thus far. Because of the urgency of the acquisition of this property, we are continuing to seek, we always continue to seek funding. That is our MO. It doesn't matter what project we're working on. We always want to bring additional, either in-kind or actual cash match to the project. We are so grateful to Lacuna for being able to be nimble as an organization because they can act a lot quicker than we can. So to have this partnership with Lacuna is extraordinarily valuable to us and other conservation organizations all over the Lowcountry. So I just want to state how grateful we are to their willingness to step up to the plate when we are limited in our ability to do so. So as far as the match goes, that's a key core value and a principle of any project that we pursue. And I just wanted to give you, from me, where I stand and where the board of the Land Trust stands, confidence that we will be bringing additional match. And Mike probably can't say this because he chairs the Conservation Bank Board, but I'm very confident in the Conservation Bank's support of this project and bringing that additional $200,000 to bear. And a change that you've just noticed is that we are not asking for due diligence or closing costs. That is essentially match of and into itself from the Lacuna Corporation. So just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank
Laura
you.
first.
This question is probably better suited to Ashley.
Okay?
When we rate applications, we use a 100-point scale. And the cultural and historical value is 5 points out of 100. And I think this is a wonderful project. I want the land to be saved, but could you please expand a little bit on the actual land and its importance?
So the property is 19 acres. You've got a mix of uplands and marsh. To me, one of the most important features of this property is its frontage on the Wallace River. And in my role and experience in working on Johns Island, particularly Johns Island and its proximity to this property in Caw is the rarity of access to water. Johns Island is woefully underserved in that way. And so this would be a property that offers very clear access to water. So yes, it's land and water are the key components of this project. 19.7 acres. I reviewed the application again, and I note that it has prime agricultural soils on it. That is not something that appears in every single application that we submit, but I do think that that's important here. With the visibility, the scenic values that it brings with the frontage along Highway 17, that's an important consideration. As Lowcountry Land Trust looks at all of these different conservation values, that's a key one. That marsh acreage that's included within it obviously has filtering properties for water quality. So to me, this project is a land and water project. And I would just submit that that's how it ought to be considered. It also fills a programmatic core value of the Lowcountry Land Trust in the sense that it is a community conservation project. It's different from an easement in the Ace Basin or on the Santee River or in McClellanville. This is a smaller acreage project, but with huge impact. So that is an expansion of our legacy of working on rural land projects traditionally in those other landscapes. So I hope that answers your question, Nora.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Nora's, because the information that y'all are providing really basically informs a recalculation of the application scoring. And I was just kind of running through those numbers, and I want to make sure that what you're saying is exactly how I'm hearing it. So 3 things we had questions about at our last time, it's the reason you're back here today, would affect that. And the first was the match, which you have addressed with, likely Conservation Bank. That application is already in the works and probably some more. Obviously, the match of the closing costs, and that puts that in a different category as well. The removal at some point of the billboards and, working through that legal process to address that. That was number 2. And 3, public access and certainty, more certainty with PRC as a partner for that eventual takeout. So that also addresses public access on the Wallace River. My calculation is that adds at least 10 plus more points. At a minimum, it's 10. It's probably more to that application, which puts it in a different category, significantly so for me in terms of approval. But I want to make sure I'm getting and understanding and confirming what you're saying.
Would you agree with those points?
agree.
I would too. Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions by the committee, I'd like to recommend approval.
Well, we gotta go to public comments first. Is there any public comments on that? Step forward, please.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank y'all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mike? No, the other Mike. Oh, your mic. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Jason.
Sorry.
Jason Crowley, Senior Program Director with the Coastal Conservation League. You all have a copy of our letter of support in your packet, but I also was unable to attend last week and wanted to come back to reiterate our support. And many of the comments that I wanted to make today were just provided in Mr. McShane and Ms. Demosthenes' presentation. But this is one of these instances where the cultural significance of the property really is relevant. This is an area where just last year we were fighting to stop a 3,000-acre annexation just on the other side of County Park into the town of Ravenel to support a major development. And this is a property just on the other side that has incredible significance related to the history of African American culture and the struggles from slavery to freedom, from the uprising in the 1730s to the struggles to be able to thrive and be successful as farmers and coming together and buying what was probably considered obsolete land in the middle of the 20th century to sell their produce and create businesses and have a place to do work in the agricultural industry, to today that real estate is now some of the most prime and valuable real estate in our region with the development pressure coming south towards this area, and a chance to recognize the history and the cultural significance and provide that water access and access to open space that's so rare in this area. Every day we're trying to work with our partners to find places in this area for public access, and here's a chance to be able to work with Charleston County Parks and Rec Commission to acquire this property, transfer it over, add that public interpretation, that public access to the water, and celebrate this slavery to freedom story that is so important to our region. And this is one of the reasons why I did want to come back and just reiterate the opportunity and the excitement to add this in and add this into the expansion in the future into Cockaded County Park. And we look forward to continuing to support this project. Thank you very much.
Mike?
Mike Emmer from the town of Ravenel. Just wanted to reiterate our support for the project.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you so much. Next up is College Charleston.
All right, well, Mr. William Barney Holt of College of Charleston Foundation comes up to provide his presentation, just a brief overview of the project. We're looking at, let me get my laser pointer going here. The request is a fee simple request in the rural area for just over 11 acres, and the request is for $131,700 with an offer of 102% match. In red here is the location of the piece of property. It's adjacent to some other greenbelt properties that were used to expand on the Stono Preserve, which is this lighter green area. And you can see some other greenbelt properties nearby. I believe this is Dungannon, just across Highway 162 up here. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Holt.
Thanks, Eric.
Just arrows down to go to the next slide.
Arrow down.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So that's your first one.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen. I'm Barney Holt with the College of Charleston, and I'm the manager of Stone Oak Preserve when things are going terribly. When they're going great, nobody ever heard of me, so that's why I thought I'd introduce myself. I'm here today with Robbie Freeman. Robbie is one of the directors of the foundation on our board of directors, and so he is here to represent the foundation. I work for the college. Robbie represents the foundation, who is the legal owner of the property. So we're both here for questions, and if y'all have any when we're done. I know you have a very busy agenda this morning, so I'm going to quickly go through these slides in appreciation of your schedule, and then we'll be here for Q&A, which if you have any of those when we're done. Stone Oak Preserve, we would not be here this morning were we not concerned about the threat of development of this 11.177 acres piece of property contiguous to ours. I've got more than I can say grace over managing this property as it is. However, this piece of property is landlocked, and it's to the northwest of that Tract A. But years and years ago, the owner of this property signed an agreement with one of his neighbors to give them an easement to either Dixie Plantation Road or Highway 162 to get access to this land, to this tract of land. We checked with our council. That easement has not been enacted, but our council tells us, the foundation legal counsel says that whoever owns this property next could very easily go to the magistrate and say, look, we have landlocked property, we need access to a public road, and the magistrate, and that would be granted. And in all likelihood, if you look at the way the tracks are laid out, it would come through our property. So not only do we not want a public road through our property, we don't want the resulting probably 50 or 60 houses that would be built, because that's the only reason you want to build a road on that tract of land. So we are here to try to preserve that 11 acres, protect it like we are doing the rest of our property under a conservation easement. If we are successful in this endeavor, we will pull our conservation easement over this property to protect it for perpetuity. We have students and staff going out there checking drift nets and bird nests and whatnot, and we don't need 50 homes out there interrupting that process. But this is where Stone Oak Preserve is. Those are the three tracks right along the Stone Oak River, directly across from Johns Island. That's Chisholm Road that comes down along there, and you can see Church Creek. And right directly south of that is Wadmalaw Sound, just a sense of where it is. We acquired the property through the will of John Henry Dick, and this is an important point to make. He was an ardent, passionate conservationist, and he left it to the College of Charleston Foundation. He died in 1995, but 2 years before his death in 1993, he put a conservation easement over his whole property. And if you read through his will and through his easement, it's very, very clear in the language that he did it for two reasons. He said, I want this property to be used as a wildlife sanctuary, as an educational platform. So it's kind of fitting that he left it to the College of Charleston. We're in the education business, and we're in the conservation business. So that's what we're using this for, and that's what we want to preserve this property for, rather than it to be developed. He had a real concern about that, and we are duty-bound morally as well as legally to honor that easement, which is held by Low Country Land Trust. And they've been great partners of ours in our earlier Greenbelt acquisitions. This is a continuation of that. That's the reason we have it. Just to give you an example of what we're doing, every year we go through and we look at the property. We're managing it actively. We're getting rid of invasives and we're replacing them with native flora and fauna. We do control burns. We plant longleaf. We have meadows. We're just actively managing it as a living laboratory for not just the sciences at the college, but it's a pan-campus platform. The English department comes down there, the arts department, and we open it up for public event venues every now and then too. Bird watching tours, classes. That is a growing big part of the vision and the future of this property, is having public folks to come out and paint, come out and bird watch, come out and just walk on the nature trail. There's a big, I just recently learned, which at my age I thought, you never think you hear it all, but I learned about the term is nature bathing in a meeting. And I had to interrupt. I try not to interrupt, but I said, please explain to me what nature bathing is. And I understand there's a great growing trend now for folks who will pay you money to go out and sit in the woods for 2 hours. And I said, why do they want to do that? I was quite suspicious. And they said, they just want to sit. I said, did they do anything weird? No, they just want to sit and listen to birds, whatever. And I said, nothing weird, just by themselves? They said, yeah, and they'll pay you a lot of money to do that. So it's a changing world out there, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I said, well, I have 981 acres we can nature bathe in. So it's the property has lots of possibilities, but that was a new one to me. Again, we're at Longleaf. We planted 150 acres. We are always interested in bringing back, as I said, native flora and fauna. We have students out there doing a lot of the work, planting trees. We planted, putting up bluebird boxes. The students just love it. A lot of our students come from inner cities. And one of the biggest things that I love the most, and I think is one of the things I'm most proud of out there, is our partnership with CCSD. Right before COVID, we had some trial summer camps during the summer, week-long camps, where we brought in mostly middle school students from the inner city schools with Charleston County, and it was ridiculous. I could talk forever, but again, I know your promise of the success of those students who came out in those woods and then came back to our research labs and had a day class. And we brought them in at 9, they left at 3. And to see those children who do not have access to these woods in a protected, safe environment, to see what they did when they came back and had lunch and then went to the classroom, to look at their artwork, to look at their questions, to watch them in action with our college faculty, I thought for myself, I said, this will change lives. It is changing lives. And then we had to shut it down because of COVID. We're bringing it back up now, and it is just amazing. It's one of the biggest benefits. And at the end of one of those days, I went back, I was checking on something over at the cemetery where John Henry Dick's buried. And I got to admit to you, as I was leaving, I turned and looked at his grave and said, we're getting it done, Mr. Henry. We're getting it done, Mr. Dick. We're doing what you want us to do. We're preserving it, and we're using it to educate, and that's the whole point. This is part of the nature trail that we have. We do bring people down. We let them walk around. It's an interpretive nature trail, like Mike was talking about his property. We have a lot of history there. It goes back to a 1638 King's Grant. We have a lot of evidence from the Yamasee Indian War, Revolutionary War, the Civil War, lots of artifacts. It's an archaeological, it's just rich with archaeological artifacts, and that's providing a lot of research there. Several books about General Greene, who's my personal Revolutionary War favorite. He had some activity there when he wanted to cross the Stono River right at the cemetery and attack the British on Johns Island in 1792, when British still held Charleston. A lot of history in there. So we opened up this trail for people to walk and learn. We have teaching stations and learning stations, and that is an ongoing process, and we're always expanding that trail as we discover more. Some of the parts of the trail, some of the interpretive signage we have where people can walk and learn. We have 3 ponds there, contiguous: saltwater, brackish, and freshwater, which I'm told doesn't exist anywhere else in the southeast. I'm not really sure that's true, but it kind of it's nice to think that you only have that. But that's a great biological lab to study on. And then my favorite, Virginia's, Carolinas, the northern bobwhite quail. As our longleaf forests are maturing, we are restocking them with species of concern. Northern bobwhite quail, except with Stono, you don't shoot them, you get to watch them, and you take pictures of them, and you study them, and you learn them. Red cockaded woodpecker, eastern diamondback rattlesnake, blue indigo snake, gopher tortoise. I mean, all these species are either of concern or close that can only thrive in longleaf forest. We have arrangements with Francis Marion Forest up there and others, Nemours down in Yamasee, to help get some of these stocks back to Stono, and we'll, when our forests are mature, and restock them with these species of concern. So the point is, it's an educational platform for not just the College of Charleston, but it does serve the people of Charleston County. And it's a wildlife sanctuary. And as we all know, with all the development that used to go to north of the county, it's all coming south of the county now. I think of Stonewall Preserve as the Alamo. It's one of the last bastions of where the native flora and fauna can be protected and left alone. They can just breathe there. And so we're asking for help for this 11-acre tract, which is under direct pressure from being sold for development, to take that offline and keep that safe too. So thank you for your time, and I'll open up for any questions for Mr. Freeman or myself.
Any questions from Nora?
Did you say that you have red cockaded woodpeckers on the site? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Did you say that you have red cockaded woodpeckers on the site?
We have not spotted them yet, but when our longleaf are mature, the folks at Francis Marion said they will give us 2 or 3 pairs to come down and populate our longleaf with those. So that's part of that plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, it's so exciting to hear what y'all are doing out there. And having been involved in this a long time ago, y'all have really done amazing things with this, Barney. And I'm curious if you could kind of summarize exactly kind of where you've grown the property, how you've looking at the maps, kind of what was the original parcel, and then the context of what might be, is there your future plans and other anticipated needs of either expansion or areas of concern around it?
You bet, Elizabeth. Naturally, when people come to the property, everybody wants to go to the water. And so we've got about roughly a mile, maybe less, but you can see our frontage on Stonewall River. So everybody wants to go down and look at the water. And that's where most of the traffic goes. But as we've expanded out to the west, to that western wing there, and we're developing fields, that's where a lot of the longleaf is. And to the north, which has kind of been ignored and been opening that up, a lot of traffic is starting to go up there. As we worked on property lines and fire breaks and access, we have discovered, for instance, I was out working on a property line, and all of a sudden I looked up, and here's this field of Adamasco lilies that it was half an acre of them. And they were just out there in the middle of nowhere. And I came back and I showed pictures of that to our board, and they were saying, take us out there and let us see that. We were cutting a fire line. I get worked up a little bit. I'm kind of excited about this. But we were cutting a fire line along that high yellow line to the upper right, a fire break. And my guy doing the burn, who's going to do the burn, called me up, and he's a biologist. They're all biologists. And he said, Mr. Holt, you need to come out here and see this. And I was downtown at a meeting. I said, Gilly, well, you really want to come see this? And Gilly's a biologist from Clemson. I left the meeting and said, I got to go. And so I drove out there, and here's this incredible, almost an entire acre of sundews. Well, sundew is a beautiful little flower. It's just about that big around. It's sort of this bright kind of orange. And technically, sundews aren't supposed to be here. It's not that they've never shown up, but they're not supposed to be this far south. There are a few up in Francis Marion, but most of them are up north above Mason-Dixon. And that's a huge find. That's a big screaming deal. So there they are, thriving in the northernmost parts. So to answer your question, Elizabeth, yes, as we are opening that up, and now, since in the past several years, you can now drive. The Dixie Plantation Road runs right through. That's that big running right through the heart of the property. That big line yellow line from the left, and the red going up to the right. That one curve in it. I've been working, so now you can drive the entire, from the westernmost tip all the way around to the easternmost tip without having to cross that road, and you can do the same thing on the northern track. You can go through the entire northern track, north to south, east to west, without having to cross the road. And people are getting out there and seeing these native, natural plants that are just growing up there, and it's giving us they're getting a whole new perspective of the property, not just the water. And the students are going up there and doing the research. The green tree, we have a lot of green tree reservoirs that are in that northern tract, and the herpetologists are going up there. So it's now that we're opening that up, the north and the west are getting a lot more attention than just everybody running to see the river.
Great, thank you.
Elizabeth, to answer your question, I think John Henry Dick left us about 900 acres. And through the generosity of the Greenbelt, we've acquired, I think, about 10 more sites, averaging about 10 acres apiece. So we're a little over 1,000 acres now. Our focus is on pieces that are large enough to have a lot of houses put on them. Hollywood has sewer. It's not that far away. So we've been, looking, we've got all the sites around us kind of prioritized, but really trying to focus on the larger ones that have the potential for developments to just try to buffer us better.
Great. Thanks, Robin.
Any public comments?
I think these are out of question.
These are questions.
Well, 2 comments. On that nature bathing thing, I've also heard it called forest bathing. and
That's
it's-
what it is,
Forest bathing, and
I'm
it's a
sorry.
very real thing. It's a very real
Really?
thing, and yeah, and it's a great answer to so many of the social media kind of pressures on these young guys, younger generation. But I want to say I applaud your work. I think it's wonderful what you're up to, and I would like to motion for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say one thing on that? I just want to commend, there's so many things to recognize how amazing this project is, but particularly the ecological significance as well as the interpretive of the history and your use of partnerships and community, growing those over time. It continues to get better and better, and I do think John Henry Dick would be very proud of the work you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next round of projects you'll hear about are from Edisto Island Open Land Trust, and Mr. Tom Austin and John Giroux are here to give you a presentation. First one you'll be hearing about is Legacy Live Oak Memorial Park Expansions B, C, and D. This would result in a total of 16.6 acres, and the request is for $160,000 in rural funds with an 85% match. And just a few details on that. The parcel in red, again, is the subject parcel that you'll be hearing about today. There are 3 small rectangular, roughly 1 acre parcels right along the southern end of this red square that constitute B, C, and D. And I know Tom has some slides to point that out further. But their match, the bulk of their match is for the remaining 13.6 acres, which is the original Live Oak Legacy Memorial Park, which they purchased and opened up prior to the Greenbelt program being implemented. So if approved, then the full acreage of the park would fall under the Greenbelt program and be added to the Greenbelt grant agreement for a total of 16.6 acres. All right, Mr. Austin.
Laser pointers on.
Use it.
All right, thank you, Eric. All right, morning. I'm Tom Austin. I'm the Land Protection Specialist for the Edisto Island Open Land Trust. And first up, I'm going to be doing Legacy Live Oak Memorial Park, as well as our Peters Point Road Vergot easement, and then John will follow up behind me with Whoopin Island. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the specific details because this project has a lot of moving parts, and if I start getting into the weeds, I'll be up here for the better part of an hour, and I'm going to spare you all that. But in total, this is 16.6 acres, like Eric said. 3 acres of that is newly protected property, and the additional 13.6 is land that we already own and have owned since 2004 that we would like to voluntarily include underneath the deed restrictions and additionally include as match. And we would like to do that, one, just for the permanent protections of the Greenbelt deed restrictions that would be added upon it, as well as to just simplify logistics for ourselves as well as Greenbelt staff so that we don't have 5 separate parcels that all have to individually be dealt with. Additionally, we do have a prior Greenbelt application that was approved in 2014 for expansion A, which is why I started with B. And none of the financials or anything else about that project are included with this application. That project is entirely separate financially, and that is not being counted in the match or anything like that, just to answer that and get it out of the way on the front end. So this is going to be an expansion of an existing nature park that we have been developing for the better part of 18 years. And we intend to keep the majority of the newly acquired land maintained as is as forested wildlife habitat, and we're just going to put one passive nature trail through the additional 3 acres that we're adding on. At the moment, it is currently forested lands, as well as that is primarily maritime fringe forest, as well as some young mixed hardwoods that are coming up. This all used to be agricultural lands. The original lot borders Sand Creek. It does have deep water access, but we do not tend to put in a dock because it's a pretty good haul to get out there. I think it's about 700 foot or so. All 4 of these parcels front the Edisto Island National Scenic Byway, and there is only one existing structure on the parcels. There's one dilapidated house on expansion D, and I'll get into that in more detail. And there's also existing park infrastructure on the original lot. So the prominent conservation values of this property are its prominence on the Edisto Island National Scenic Byway, as well as its ability to expand and buffer our existing park. At the moment, these small 1 acre parcels on Edisto Island are just ballooning in price, and they're getting snatched up left and right. And these really marginal lands that we didn't think would ever get developed are just, people are grubbing them and putting in houses faster than we ever thought would be, imaginable. So these properties are at risk, and that's why we've already closed on one of the parcels, and we have contracts on the other 2 to purchase them as fast as we can. Just to touch on the existing structure, as you can see, the house is well and truly gone. This was built in the 40s. We don't think it has any historic value. We will look into it, but we believe it was just a small residence built back in the 40s. But the Edisto Island Open Land Trust will be entirely responsible for removing that, cleaning up the site, and revegetating it. This is the farthest south parcel, so we don't intend to put any significant amenities there just because how close it is to adjacent parcels that we don't own. We'd like to acquire those parcels in the future, but we can't guarantee it. But we will try and revert that area back to a more natural state. Our plans for public access, this is going to be just a passive nature park, nothing major. We plan to have a small, entirely pervious parking area up on the northwest corner on the original lot. Plan for about 20 parking spaces. It'll be either unpaved or just have plantation mix in there for the main roadways. We plan to have a half-mile trail loop. We already have most of that in place, already cut and marked. It just needs to be filled and put in some footbridges on the expansion A parcel. And then we will be putting in a new spur connecting into that, creating a smaller quarter-mile loop through expansions B, C, and D, as well as the original lot. We also need to put in about a 50-foot boardwalk on the original lot in order to cross a ephemeral wetland that runs through the original lot, as well as all of B and into C. There's just we prefer not to fill that in, and the quickest route A to B is to just put a low 4-foot boardwalk, that short strip over across that wetland. When Greenbelt staff was out there last month, it was entirely dry, but sometimes it's 12, 18 inches deep right there. So we just need to have a way for folks to get across that. It's minimal impact as we can. I'd also like to touch on the delays that we have experienced with implementing this park. We originally hoped to get all this infrastructure put in on the expansion A parcel back when we were approved in 2014. We had plans to work with Charleston County Parks and Rec as well as DOT on a fishing pier they wanted to do off of the highway up where they were redoing the Sand Creek Bridge. And I am now happy to report 7.5 years later, they are done with the bridges, and we are finally able to move forward with implementing the park. Additionally, in that meantime, AT&T secured a utility easement from us on the original lot so that they could bore fiber optic lines underneath Sand Creek. They got fed up with waiting on the bridges, and so they just went ahead and put fiber optic and conduit down the road shoulder. So we no longer are waiting on AT&T nor the bridges, so we're finally able to move forward with the park and implement all of our plans that we've had for years. And to get into the transactional details, all in all, for these 3 lots that we are acquiring, they're 3 acres in total. They appraised for $43,000 each for a grand total of $129,000. We were able to secure contracts at $133,000. 2 of these parcels were listed for, I think one was listed on the open market for $52,000 and the other one for $48,000. And we were able to get the $48,000 down to $40,000. We've already closed on that lot at $40,000, so $3,000 underneath market value. The third parcel, we spoke to landowner and we were able to work out a negotiated price at $45,000 for that lot. And the other one, they only came down to $48,000. But we're only asking for Greenbelt up to the contract price or the fair market value, whichever comes first. So all in all, we're only asking $126,000 for the acquisitions themselves. In addition to that, we've budgeted $14,000 for closing costs for all three parcels, as well as any other due diligence work that needs to be done for the original lot in order for Greenbelt to accept it into the program. We don't anticipate we'll need to use all of that, but we've left a buffer in there because due diligence costs and closing costs are just ballooning as it is, and it seems that every time we get a quote, it's up 10% every time. So additionally, we're asking for $20,000 for minor improvements, and that's broken down to about $2,000 for trail clearing on these three lots, about $11,000 to get in all the fill, level, and put in plantation mix for the parking lot, and then additionally about $7,000 for the boardwalk. If we're able to do the boardwalk with volunteer labor, it should be a fraction of that, but we can't guarantee we're going to have skilled labor on demand when we need it. So we budgeted $7,000 to get a contractor to do that. Additionally, so all in all, we're asking for $160,000 for this project, and we have $136,000 match. As Eric mentioned, $85,000 of that is from our original lot, and that was the appraised value in 2004 when we purchased it. We are confident it has gone up significantly since then, but we did not have it appraised prior to the application. And we can have it appraised again if you would like prior to closing. And I forget the exact number I had in there, but I believe it's somewhere around $30,000 that we have in additional designated funds for the park, and that includes maintenance costs, landscaping, interpretive signage, kiosks, a bunch of things that are not covered by the minor improvement costs. So we're asking for $20,000 for the core minor improvements needed for the park infrastructure, and then everything else will be covered by the land trust from our already designated funds from donors. And then additionally, there's $3,000 match from that one property that's already closed that was $3,000 below fair market value, and we've included that as landowner match. And I believe there was also some in-kind match as well from a survey we got donated, as well as some parking stops that we have, but nothing significant. Here's a quick overview of the surrounding protected properties. As you can see, there has been a lot of conservation work on Little Edisto and the surrounding area in the past. This property is contiguous across Sand Creek with some marshlands owned in fee by the South Carolina Audubon Society. Closely, but not contiguous to the property, are the Paradise Shrimp Farms, as well as the Sand Creek Farm easements, both successful Greenbelt applications. One 505 acres, and the other one, I think, closer to 300. Then contiguous with that is the Jalassy Farm easement, contiguous with that, the Old Dominion easement, as well as the Red Top and the Riverside properties owned by Charleston County Parks and Rec. The Ace Basin National Wildlife Refuge is up there in the northwest. We have another successful Greenbelt application on Russell Creek Road, the Graves Ash Point easement, and then we also have 9 other conservation easements that we hold on Russell Creek Road, and Low Country Land Trust has 2, one immediately adjacent to the property directly to the south. We have support from some local organizations. The Edisto Island Preservation Alliance manages the Edisto Island National Scenic Byway. So of course they're a partner with us. They're a partner on any project we do along the National Scenic Byway. They support our efforts to improve protect the scenic viewshed of the scenic highway, as well as create amenities on it for tourists and visitors to the island. We have the support of the Edisto Island Community Association. Tim Evans from the South Carolina Audubon Society wrote support as contiguous landowner, as well as Mark Crawford and Randy and John Snow, who own Sand Creek Farms and the southern portion of Paradise Shrimp Farms, respectively. And that's all I have for the overview. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about the specifics of the transactions.
Questions? Elizabeth.
So, yeah, let me just make sure I understand the match and kind of the use of the larger parcel, and then how that fits in. That was not a Greenbelt project, and you're now including it in the Greenbelt application, and that's how that works, just to make sure I understand that correctly.
We voluntarily like it to be
put it into the whole mix. Okay. So that will be obviously viewed from a management point of view as well as a conservation point of view as one tract.
Yes.
So that'll have Greenbelt, it'll be a Greenbelt agreement, project agreement on that, and we'll have those kind of limitations. Have you thought about, in case you transfer the property, putting an easement on it or permanent deed restrictions on the whole tract at any point. Obviously, you can't do that when you still own it if it was to yourself, but in the case of a transfer, say County Parks wanted it or something like that one day.
That's a discussion that we've had internally, just generally for all of our fee simple properties. We have not yet sorted out an internal policy that totally encapsulates that, because we also do have trade lands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's trying to find the balance between a global policy and something that we can have designated for specific properties that have special conservation values like this and like our Hutchinson House property.
Right.
But we have talked about it, but not in depth, and we don't have a global policy requiring that yet.
I encourage that. We have a number of projects that do that, and it's very helpful. And I know that, some of the agencies appreciate that too. So, but that was my question. Thank you.
Anyone from the public? Do you have a motion?
I move approval.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Next.
Thank you.
Stick with the form here. And introduce Tom's next project, which is the Peters Point Road Vergot easement, correct? No silent T there.
Up every time.
Okay. It's located right here off of Peters Point Road. It's a long rectangular piece going all the way up to Store Creek, I believe. And it is a conservation easement request in the rural area for 17.4 acres. And the request is for $45,000 in rural funds with a 78% match. Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Eric. It's me again. So this property is a conservation easement application. Ms. Vergot's property is about 17.4 acres in total. 10.3 of that is high ground, and the rest is salt marsh. Current land uses are for her as her primary residence, as well as woodlands. It's not actively managed for timber, but the timber there is healthy. She primarily wants it for wildlife habitat, and that's how she maintains her property. The property is entirely upland forest as well as salt marsh. There is a low bluff immediately on Store Creek leading down to the salt marsh, so there is not a transitional period or any sort of ephemeral wetlands on the property. It's accessible off of Peters Point Road. It fronts Store Creek, and there are 4 existing structures. There's the primary dwelling up on the waterfront, as well as a shed and a small car cover. And then up on the head of the road, there is a pottery kiln that the owner used to use. The property has a well-established upland forest canopy with a stratified understory. It provides great wildlife habitat for the surrounding area, and it does not impede wildlife movements between any of the surrounding properties. This area of Peters Point Road is actually at surprising risk for rapid development. We have seen some very, very creative, dense micro developments on the property in the last decade or two that were surprising to all of us. Properties just several thousand feet to the east have been developed to their maximum density that were just similar thin agricultural lots like this. Based on the current zonings and the dimensions of the lot, we think this could get the full 10 subdivisions in on this property. So there is a significant risk that if the owner sold, that it could be developed at its maximum density. This property also has significant connectivity to other protected lands. It's contiguous along its entire eastern boundary with our Risher easement, as well as it's immediately across the road from our Carter Island easement. It's also straight across Store Creek from the Middleton's easement, which is another successful Greenbelt application. It's also about 1,400 foot to the east from the Peters Point easement, another successful Greenbelt application. All in all, we have protected 32% of Peters Point Road through 8 conservation easements, and we are trying to get that percentage as close to 50 as we can, and we are actively working in this area. So this is part of a larger conservation initiative on the island by us. Here's some of the draft conservation easement terms. It's a fairly restrictive easement. No further subdivision, just limited to the one lot. Only one residence is permitted. We do have an allowance for an additional guest house or addition. And the building envelope will be sited up towards the waterfront where all of the existing residential structures already exist. There will be no more than 2% impervious surface in the aggregate, which works out to 9,000 square feet on the whole property. No commercial industrial uses, no mining. Agricultural uses are still permitted, and agricultural structures to support those agricultural uses are still permitted, but those are covered underneath the blanket impervious surface allowance. Recreational hunting is permitted, forestry is permitted with an approved forest management plan. There will be a roadside buffer on Peters Point Road. There will be a waterfront buffer and setback on Store Creek. However, the existing structures will be grandfathered in and allowed to exist unless totally destroyed. But new structures will have to be built outside of that setback. There's no disturbance to wetlands and no docks permitted on the property either. And there are no existing docks either. We had a preliminary appraisal estimate range given to us for the property, and it appraised for a mean value, fair market value of just the land of $385,000. And then we also got a mean conservation easement value of $60,000. We think once the appraisers get the full conservation easement document, can really fine tune the calculations, that will go up by 20-30%. But at the moment, it's $60,000. We negotiated a bargain sale price with the landowner of $25,000 for the easement value, and they are donating $35,000 of that value as match. We're also requesting $20,000 for closing costs. Like I said before, there's a healthy buffer built in there because it seems like the due diligence costs are just, we start a project and they go up 25% by the time we get to the end of it. And there's always something that comes up that we didn't expect that has to be covered. And for the last 3 projects, we've covered that internally after the fact, after the Greenbelt application. All in all, we're requesting $45,000, which works out to be $2.6 thousand per acre, which is somewhat close to the mean, I believe. I haven't updated it since last year. And in total, we have $35,000 match, about 78%. Here is just the sort of surrounding connectivity with other protected lands. As you can see, it's contiguous with the 2 easements to its east and its south. It's very close to the Peters Point easement, and it's also straight across the creek from the Middletons. You can see the bulk of our land protection on Peters Point Road has been up near the head of the road with the Sunnyside easements. And then there's that sort of larger, massive protected lands area up in the northwest corner of Edisto Island, which is surrounding Legacy Live Oak and the Whooping Island properties as well, which is still within about 2 miles of the property. And that's all I have.
You said the zoning today is 1 dwelling per acre?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? Elizabeth?
Can you go back to the map that that right there, and talk a little bit about the strategy, because just kind of going down Peters Point Road, and that being one of your conservation priorities, talk a little bit about where your priority areas are, not specific properties, but kind of how this, being a small, narrow property and smaller than most others, may have significance in terms of other protection or future protections.
Well, Peters Point Road is somewhat interesting. It's similar to Little Britain Road, which is another conservation area we're working on, like with our previous Jenny King easement. It's kind of subdivided between massive properties and properties that are subdivided to their maximum extent already and already fully developed. So this property is one of the very few that falls in the in-between. It's only 10 acres, but it's 10 acres AGR, so it could be subdivided significantly more. Immediately to the east, pretty much all of those properties from there all the way up to that big field you see over on the right side of the property, those are all, between 1 and 5 acre properties. And then everything to the west of this property is Ag 10, and everything is, for the most part, 20 acres or more. So this is one of the few properties on the road that is somewhat small, but also highly developable and sought after. So we're trying to protect as many of these properties as we can at the moment because they have the most development potential and the biggest risk for destruction of their conservation values. And so we're actually upping efforts here in the next couple of weeks, and we're trying to meet with as many landowners on the road as we can to get as many of these smaller properties protected as we can. And we're also working on the larger landowners as well. Believe there's about 10 or 20 properties left on the road that are over 20 acres, but there's about 160 in total, and the rest of them are all under 20 acres. So those are slow going.
So moving just west between Peters Point current easement and the red lines that you indicate for this property, in between there, those are small properties, or
No,
that's
sir.
what you're saying is when,
Yeah, I think there's 2 properties and then 2 smaller access easement parcels between this and that one. So there's actually on the waterfront, there's just the 1 parcel between those 2. It's to the other side that the smaller parcels are.
and what's the situation with that property?
Complicated.
Complicated? Okay.
But we have spoken to that landowner in the past. I think that actually got to the point, there may have actually been a prior Greenbelt application that I don't know if it ever went to the public, but we're in talks with that landowner. So, but it's complicated.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Elizabeth.
Yes, so one thing that really struck me is the budget for the closing costs. It's extraordinarily high, and it's at about 18% of the whole request. And usually we're well under 2 or 3%, and often donated. And that seems a little out of whack for this. So if you could explain that a little more.
Certainly. So as I said, there's a buffer in there. I think we have about a $5,000 buffer in that. The price for conservation easement appraisal is getting up to the point where it's about $6,500 now. The landowner, we're trying not to have them pay any closing costs because they're donating the majority of their easement value, so we'd like to cover all of their closing costs. I don't think, the plat has not been updated in the last 30 years. I don't think it has the existing house. We're going to have the plat re-updated. We're going to have an ESA done as well for y'all as well as our own requirements. That works out to about, I have it all broken down in the application. I can't think through it immediately, but I believe it's going to be about $12,000 at least. Additionally, we have to have attorney's fees on top of that. We have to get the easement reviewed. And with the Jenny King application, we asked for about $15,000, and we're already at about $28,000 already for that, and we've covered the remaining costs on that out of pocket. So it's just the current market the way it is.
Crazy.
Sounds like the business to be in.
It's appraiser.
Charlie?
It always seems that something comes up too that you weren't expecting and you didn't put it in the budget, and it bites you every time.
All right. Right? Did you have a question? Sorry.
Just a question. I'm certainly making an assumption the current owner will remain on the property. And whenever the property does change hands in the future, all the restrictions to maintain and flow through it permanently.
Yes. I think she intends to donate it as well to a local charity. I don't know if they'll hold it or if they will just use it as a trade land to generate revenue, but that is her intent. She does not plan to sell the property until ever. So, but yes, the easement will be maintained forever.
Great.
In perpetuity.
Dude,
Yeah.
go ahead.
That might have answered my question, but I didn't quite hear the question. Was it about the intent of the current owner? Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
partially.
Okay. Is there any way to link this to your work just to the west? Because if like what happens just to the west isn't protected, then this becomes sort of like a single slender piece on that road that I don't think is as meaningful. It did not score terribly well either. Would it be a burden to you guys if it were conditional on what happens to the west?
Extremely. Again, it's complicated. We would love to see the entire end of the road totally protected, but there's a lot of family dynamics in there. We've been in talks with that landowner. We're not certain we can make an easement happen. It's 26 acres, Ag 10, so it can only be 2 lots.
Two dwellings.
Okay, and this one is absolutely verified at 1 per acre.
AGR.
That's why I asked that.
Okay,
On the record.
all right.
And unless the county maps are wrong, I'm 100%
We
confident.
can check on that. Any public comments on this? Any motion from the board?
I'll move to approve.
A second?
Is there discussion?
I'll second it.
All in
The
favor?
for discussion points, I think, I just want you to know why we're a little silent on that, at least from my point of view, because.
All of us.
Yeah, all of us are. It did not score well, and I think that Beezer's point is a really good one, that this is, the power of this one is in the context of the whole and the ability for greater conservation, basically what I call saving that portion of Edisto Island. So the presumption that it's a critical link is a big one, and I understand how these things go. You can't tie, it'd be nice to be able to tie it and have a conditional thing, but that's not the way it works. It actually works the other way, that if this is protection, hopefully this will be a leadership move that'll allow you to, a stepping stone towards more. So we'd like to have certainty on our end that that would happen, but I understand the way this works, it doesn't. And so I just want to be clear that we're hopeful that this can be a springboard, at least in my mind, even though it did not score as well as I'd like to see. I understand kind of some unusual circumstances about that.
Thank you for saying that, Elizabeth. I totally agree, and I'll support it wholeheartedly. But it is, it is with the hope that something comes together west.
So we have a motion to approve. Do I have a
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Next.
You have to have a beach house somewhere.
All right, the third project you'll hear about from Edisto Island Open Land Trust today is the Whooping Island Scenic Buffer. It's shown again in red here, just as you cross the, what I call the Dahu Bridge coming onto Edisto Island in red. And it is a request for fee simple purchase of 10 acres in the rural area, $167,500 in rural funds, with a 5% match, and about 40. There's a request for 45,000 of that for minor improvements. And Mr. John Giroux will be providing a presentation now.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you, committee members. Maybe real quick, just to back up to Tom's presentation for clarification too, what we're seeing in Peter's point in particular, some very creative development opportunities with these 10-acre tracts. So there's one right now that has just occurred. We've also got some longtime developers, real estate folks on Edisto, who have held on to property, and now they are at the point in their lives where they're starting to sell and subdivide those parcels. So we are hopeful that this will be not just to the property to the west, but that property in particular will be a catalyst for some of these other landowners who are maybe being enticed by some of these developers to protect their properties in other areas in the adjacent kind of vicinity of that project, just so you know, just to give some more clarification there. Okay, so this project, thought I'd give Tom a little bit of a break and share this opportunity with you. We'll probably say whoopin' or whoopin' a couple different ways here, but this is a significant parcel that is truly at the gateway to Edisto Island. So to give you some context here, this is the McKinley-Washington Bridge, and the parcel is on your left as you come across the McKinley-Washington, literally onto Edisto Island. It is one of the gateway parcels to Edisto. And if you've driven onto Edisto recently, what you'll recognize, which is still quite an anomaly, is that iconic view shed. You can be at the top of the McKinley-Washington, or the Dahu Bridge, as Eric calls it, and you can actually, as far as the eye can see, just like in other areas of the Ace Basin, you don't see a dwelling. You see the tippity top of one house off to the left, but otherwise, it is that iconic, really quintessential Edisto perspective of a sea island naturescape. And this area, as you can see directly around the property, and I think I have another map that shows a little better, it is Rosa Scott Road at the base of the bridge as well, which is a dirt road. There's about 4 homes there, but we are seeing folks acquiring these properties. This parcel we're looking at has been for sale for many, many years at a very inflated price. It's finally come down to a price that we were able to negotiate down to the appraised value at $115, but it's definitely been at risk of acquisition. We're very concerned about the opposite side of the road here, and there has been, unfortunately, a death in the family of one of these parcels. All this is completely undeveloped here too. So we are again hoping this will be a catalyst for us to work with some of these adjacent landowners. The property itself has conservation value, obviously. It is a maritime forest. It is a marsh area. It does have some wonderful woodland area as well. But again, in all honesty, we are most focused on this because it is truly a scenic gateway to the island. And we're concerned if we do not acquire it, that it will be developed in the not too distant future and truly impair that initial impact that you get when you arrive on Edisto, which has become and is becoming more and more an anomaly in the region of the Low Country. So that's the primary reason, just to be clear with everybody, that we are attempting to acquire this parcel. So again, here it is zoomed in for you a little bit. The intent here is to provide public access as well. So this is kind of double dipping in preserving this area, keeping it from being developed residentially, but allowing some limited public access to it or open public access by putting in a very small parking area right off of 174. Again, Tom mentioned to you all that is a National Scenic Byway designated in 2009. We have really started to increase our rate of working with the local community to preserve the corridor of the National Scenic Byway. As Tom mentioned, we are all a little bit concerned about these 1 acre parcels all along 174 that are being developed, and not most of them, unfortunately, are not being developed in an aesthetically pleasing manner. So we are increasing our pace of trying to find some parcels along the entire Scenic Byway, this being one of the most iconic areas that you approach. So real quick, very simple, a little parking area with a connection to Rosa Scott, which is off of the property, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but this little section here is what the land trust would be paying for, since it falls outside of the property boundaries and not covered by any Greenbelt minor improvement funding. A small walking trail to a boardwalk, a raised boardwalk platform because it does get wet in there, and at very high tides it can get wet in there, with a very small overlook for folks to be able to see. It's directly across from the Dahu Landing Bridge, the Dahu Landing boat landing. So you've got public access, you've got the old remnants of the bridge over here. I mean, you do have a view shed, but it's completely different. It's all asphalt, and it is in a very busy area of boat traffic. So this could provide a nice tranquil trail on the other side of the National Scenic Byway. To get into the numbers real quick, it again has been reduced to its lowest price on the market, and we negotiated them down to what we got the appraisal for. So it appraised for $115,000. It is 10 acres. 7 of that is, again, salt marsh. 3 of that is developable high ground. So this is $115,000. We're requesting the full amount. We are putting in there some of the cost for the closing expenses. And of course, in order to make it publicly accessible, we have the minor improvement request in there as well for a total of $167,500. The match, I know we're going to talk about, that is the amount that the land trust is potentially putting forward for cash, for interpretive signage, and for that additional road. What I think is kind of important for us to mention here, for me to mention, is that not included in that match is what the land trust, what the Edisto Land Trust is kind of embarking upon. As we look at the future, we look at the relevance of our organization, the reality of us branching off of the island, but not extremely far. We've got some amazing other regional land trusts that are doing exceptional work in and around Edisto. We're going to be focused on some of these public access areas, and so we're taking on this responsibility with the Hutchison House, with the Legacy Live Oak Park that you just heard about, and with this project to manage, maintain, and update these properties in perpetuity. So I think there's a lot of match involved here that we didn't include in the application, but it's worth mentioning that we are taking on this responsibility to create these public spaces and ensure that they'll be there forever, as long as we are able to maintain them. So that's the financial numbers. This map, you've seen most of it since Tom presented it, but I think it's important to give you context to the location. You didn't get to see this far up, but the reality is the property is flanked all the way to the south by tons of protected property. Of course, the National Refuge is just beyond that. But again, I think this gateway element is critical for us, and I'm hoping that you all feel similar, and we can discuss how this can come together. But I have just witnessed as you all have too, all across Charleston County and the Low Country, all the bridges that you cross, this wonderful project that the Low Country Land Trust has forward, these gateways where you first land off of these bridges into communities have been disrupted. I mean, I started working with the East Cooper Land Trust, the Edisto Land Trust. We had visions before all the development was done at the base of the Arthur Ravenel Bridge, of that area down there not being developed. We worked with some of the landowners. I mean, you know, we were pie in the sky that that might not happen. Now you drive off the bridge and you can almost reach out the window and touch the parking garage and everything that's happening there. So, you know, we are really hopeful that Edisto will remain much the way that it is. But this to us is a pretty strategic and critical property to make sure that happens. We've got lots of great support from local organizations and associations. We had a landowner meeting. There's only about 5 or 6 landowners on Rosa Scott. We met with them out there on the site, answered questions. They all seemed pretty excited about it. Not all of them submitted letters of support. I don't believe anybody that we know of submitted a letter of opposition. They look forward to a potential amenity on the property, and as well, it's kind of one of those, they're glad they got their parcels. They would be more happy if nobody else develops anywhere in that area as well. So they're excited about the prospect. And this view just gives you a little bit from the southbound lane. All that you see on the left side there is the property we're talking about, and that's part of that iconic entrance gateway view shed that you have coming onto Edisto.
Any public questions? Okay, board. Any questions? Elizabeth?
Yeah, so on your last point, John, talking about neighboring landowners and other conservation efforts, you've talked about this project as the gateway and the benefit of the public access. I'm curious in terms of it being a potential catalyst too, even though for its unique purpose may not be that, it's, you know, catalytic impact for others.
Well,
Protection.
yeah, I mean, here's that map to give you perspective. This entire area over here is unprotected. There are a lot of landowners there that have been long time, you know, 3rd, 4th generation family members that own this. Unfortunately, we missed the boat. The parcel directly across from it is being developed, and it's exactly what we don't want to see. And they're a wonderful landowner, and we've gotten to know them a little bit, but they purchased this acreage directly across, and they're putting in a large garden area here and a house over here. You can see these folks have built their house. This is an older house here. There is a lot between us and this house, and it was recently purchased because it was put on the market not too long ago. We're hopeful that this landowner, which we understand we didn't meet with them, may not be interested in building. So we're hopeful that they may either be interested in selling their parcel or even putting an easement on it and building something that would be very low profile. So we are hopeful that we can work with that person. But yes, the catalyst for this entire landing zone for Edisto is pretty critical. And so we do hope it opens the door. And folks, again, see the opportunity to be compensated, whether it's an easement or the interest in selling their property.
So if this were not protected, what would be the development potential if it went to development?
It's 3 acres, high ground. I don't know that you could get 3 units there, so you're probably looking at max 2 houses could be built there. And the dilemma is it's wet. So there's a lot of wet, so it would be a very tall house. It would have to be up very high. So it would be a very prominent feature as you enter Edisto as opposed to the natural feature that you have now.
So one more question, and this is just I'm just curious because I think we need to understand as a Greenbelt the potential rising costs of closing costs and when we're looking at this. And I notice on this application, you've got more like 2% on closing costs. And I know it varies according to what you need with each property, but I'm just curious that really compared to the 18% on Peters Point.
So the main difference here is this is a fee simple acquisition, which is the easiest transaction that we can have. So there are no easement fees. There's a lot less cost involved, and there's very few attorney's fees involved. So that's the predominant reason that. Unless I'm forgetting something else, Tom, but yeah, it's really just a simple transaction. Not to go back too far, but we just, with that last transaction that we're completing, which will close, the conservation easement on the Jenny King property that you all approved last year, there were quite a considerable number of expenses that surfaced from that. And that's why it's not closing too, because there was a small title blip that happened at the last minute that caused some additional cost for that. So we were really just being cautious. And I do not think we'll spend the total in that previous application that was put in there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
John, can you go back to the public access slide or the little trail opportunity?
Yes, sir.
And so that's a defined plan that is happening if this goes through as designed here.
Correct. I mean, within reason. This is not an official drawing. This is a map we created ourselves. Tom's great at map drawing. It's about 500 feet long. About half of it would not require any kind of a raised boardwalk, but the other half would. We're pushing it over. It may even go a little further to the right with a little overlook. We don't want it to be visible from the highway, honestly. We want this to remain a natural area, but we do want to give folks a nice view. So that's approximate, but it would be about 200 feet, 200 max 50 feet of boardwalk and about 200 feet of just, plantation mix or just dirt walkway.
And the overlook is like a raised platform, like a birding platform or whatever.
Well, not even that raised. We really haven't gotten into the design phase, Beezer, but it would be low profile, 2 to 4 people, very minimal. We don't anticipate a tremendous amount of traffic here. And frankly, in all honesty, the public access element of this is sort of being driven by our application to the Greenbelt program. If the Land Trust had lots and lots of funds in our acquisition fund, we might acquire this and just leave it in its natural state. But since we're going after public funding, we thought it was beneficial to put in some sort of public access.
Just a comment as a resident of Edisto and one who goes over that bridge a great deal, there is something when you talk about the gateway, there is a feeling that you get when you come across that bridge that's maybe you take a couple of deep breaths or something like that, that I think all the residents of Edisto would agree with, as well as those who are coming to the beach and spending, our visitors that come. And I think this was I'm glad this project's on there to maintain that vista.
Yes,
Any other
ma'am.
questions?
Nora?
I'm having trouble with this. I was fortunate to be on the site visit with you and the staff, and this land is gorgeous. It is the gateway to Edisto. I'm sure everybody has seen it and would recognize it. Can you give some more information? You said that there was more than the 5% match due to some other things that you have. Could you please explain that?
Well, what I'm suggesting is that we are going to be responsible in perpetuity for maintaining and managing this property. This is not one that we're looking to Charleston County Parks and Rec or DNR or any other entity to assist us with it. So we will be responsible for installing all of the interpretive signage. That's to be determined. So all along the walkway there will be signage that will be replaced over the years. We'll be maintaining the parking area. Those are costs that we haven't necessarily calculated, but we certainly know there will be cost of picnic tables. We assume there will be trash. That's the first thing folks concern themselves with is trash and criminal activity when you do anything public like this. So we'll have, expenses in monitoring and managing the property. But the other thing that was on that map was the connectivity to Rosa Scott Road. It is a little bit of a tricky intersection. I mean, that section of 174, as you can imagine, coming off of the bridge, folks can get going pretty fast there. So we want to make it as safe as possible. So by putting in that separate entranceway that the Land Trust would be responsible for and connecting to Rosa Scott, we allow kind of a horseshoe there for folks to come in and out. In case there is more traffic than we anticipate in the future. So, but it's the unknowns, Nora, that we will be responsible for in perpetuity that I'm kind of inferring could be considered match.
I think it'd be nice to have a storyboard on McKinley, Washington, so people know who he is. We don't have that there.
Absolutely.
Any motions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Thank you. Any public comments regarding the 2022 winter projects? Any comments from the board considering 2022 winter projects? Okay. Next that's nomination and election of officers.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bell reminded me at the last meeting, I don't think you all have actually nominated and elected chairman and vice chairman for this body in quite some time, and that this could be an opportunity to do that again. It would just be a simple nomination and majority vote for chair or vice chair, should you choose to do so.
Beazer.
I'm proud of the work we've done for the past couple of years, and I think we've done a good job, and we're coming into a nice pattern almost, and I would just motion that we move forward as we are.
Can you state who that is, just for the record, the names?
I believe it's Charlie as
Yep.
chair, and I believe it's Taylor as vice.
Perfect.
I hope I have that correct.
That's
Motion.
Was that a test? Was that a pop quiz?
Yeah, it was. You did well.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No.
I guess we're still here.
Thank you.
Okay. Next meeting to be determined?
Yes, sir.
That's it? We're done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for being so professional, courteous, and kind.